We're going to just...
I just did it. I'm
You
good.
did?
Yep.
All right, cool. So I am going to share my screen once I figure out how to do that. And then... Boom, 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 boom. So many buttons. All right. So can everyone see? I'm assuming yes. All right. I was going to say, I'm assuming yes.
Yeah, just go.
So here we have the report for April. And I asked, polled the audience a little bit before we started, just to see how everyone's feeling. And they're saying that maybe perhaps in their personal business, they haven't noticed too much, but I will tell you, the market has shifted. So basically what we're seeing is, so air quotes, longer term effects from what's happening with all the uncertainty around coronavirus and employment and all of that. So longer term, because it's brand new, right? But we didn't see as much of this in March. And so we're going to get into the numbers, and depending on how confusing that gets, I've got March up in another tab here. So we'll kind of go back and forth, but we'll see how it goes. So based on feedback from last month, which was volume 1, we're on volume 2 now. And so you'll notice there's a slight difference. And so every other month, ideally, we're going to try and keep it the same. The format's the same. So as you're using it with your clients and everything, you're super knowledgeable. Even if you haven't looked at it in 3 months, it'll basically be the same. So what this sheet is, I've got it up here at the top and at the bottom with little explanations. But so you've got on the left, there's the number, the actual number for whatever it might be, new listings for the month. Then the top number is the change compared to last month. And then the bottom number is the change compared to the same month last year. So new listings, just going through it, new listings were down 24% from March, but we're down 41% from last April, right? And so you'll see kind of that trend. And this is just kind of the raw numbers. We'll get into the graphs that show everything a little bit better. But basically, we're down on a lot of important metrics. Active listings were only up about 8%. And so we'll see in the charts again, we've been increasing single digits ever since the beginning of the year, but that is down considerably from this time last year is when we're supposed to start skyrocketing up. Under contract, we actually increased from last month, which was great. That's a very promising thing. And so again, this is total homes under contract. That doesn't necessarily mean that last month more homes went under contract. It just means that it could be they've extended since last month, plus the end, all sorts of things. But there's a healthy market where people are still buying. Again, down 40% from last year. So somewhere between 20 to 40% down is kind of consistent for the different metrics. Homes sold down 20%, but again, that's a lagging metric, right? Right now, our contract to close is floating around 45-ish days. So these homes originally went under contract basically before or at the moment that this pandemic was hitting. So that's a lagging metric, and it's actually only down a comparable amount from this time last year. We'll get into that a little bit later, how it's important that even though the numbers are down, the trends and the ratios are pretty similar. So that means that, the volume, the pieces of the pie are smaller, or rather relatively proportionally the same of a smaller pie overall. Expireds, we reduced in expireds from last month and last year, which is great. Withdrawals again went down compared to last month and this time last year, also good. And if anyone has any questions or comments or want to add some color into all this, please feel free to just jump in. So now we have what are considered activities. Our days to close, like I was saying, I guess it's 48%, so slightly up from last month, but down, right, or rather longer than last year as well, sorry, and we'll get to the graphs there as well. Average days on market going down, right? So homes are selling faster, basically. So days on market are from the time it's listed to the time the seller gets an offer that they accept. So that's gone down. Now our absorption rate has gone down. And so if we get over here, just a quick little lesson, right? The absorption rate above 20 is generally associated with the seller's market. Below 15, generally associated with the buyer's market, right? So the fact that it went down is bad. It's going towards a buyer's market, which means homes will sell slower and there'll be less of that kind of stuff going on. So even though it went down—
Let's not say bad.
Okay, so it's a different market, right? Depending on what side you're representing. Totally. If you're a buyer, it's great.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, that was my point.
There you go. So even though it's down from last month, right? It's actually only down about 7% from this time last year, right? Not horrible. So average sales price, again, down, lagging metric. Average, as we'll get into it in the graph there, average is if you just take all of the homes and divide it by how many homes sold. So it's not exactly representative. On the graph, it is, but on the graph, a better metric is the median. The median is if you take all of the homes together in a list and organize them and just take that middle number, right? A great example is if, if 100 homes sold and 99 of them sold for $1 and one of them sold for $1 trillion, well, then your average would be massive and it wouldn't be even remotely representative of the market. But the median would be $1 and that would make sense, right? So now your average list sale, which is a great magic number, is about 98%, holding steady, and it kind of stays like that in the market. But something to note as the realtor, right, while you're having this discussion, is that number is the number that the home is listed at when it receives an offer, right? So when it receives an offer to the time it closes, they stay within about a 2% margin. That is not the number it was originally listed at. So as you're using this as a guide and everything to talk to your clients, whether it be if you're putting in an offer or if you're listing the home, you use that as a data point. You could say, hey, well, they haven't had a price reduction, and it looks like based on our research and my experience and all that we can come in a little bit lower. But if they have already reduced price, then you're in that not a lot of wiggle room. And then same thing if you have a listing. They're saying, hey, we want to reduce the price or we want to stay high. And you're like, well, you haven't received offers. And by the time you do, you stay in like that. Month's inventory, down, good, right? That's more towards seller's market. And we'll see how that plays out. And then, whoops, as you see from last year, huge decrease. So very, very good, right? So we'll see all this in a second. So now we come into the price ranges. And this might get slightly confusing, but the graphs will help. So now we'll do April, March, April, March. Basically, all I want you to look at right here is this column that's green, the absorption rate and the month's inventory. So green and red. This is this month. And if we go to March, this is that month. What you'll notice here in the middle and towards the end, so around the 400,000 price point and up, where it was mostly green, a little bit red, and then the gray is a neutral market, right? You'll see that there's more neutral and more red. So back to our month's inventory and absorption rate and everything. We're moving more towards more towards buyer's markets, right? Or balanced markets, basically. And again, all that is explained here on the right. So if you're handing this off to a client or if you just need to freshen up as you're talking about it, you just read it right off to them. And there's a beautiful explanation of how it works. And then just to skip ahead, since we're on this, if you go to the last slide, right, of each one of these, there's formulas. So when they say, well, how do you find the absorption rate? Or if they want to play around with it themselves, there's the answer. So months inventory pending and absorption rate are defined that way. So back to the markets themselves. So new listings last month, let's see. New listings in the 250 to 299 segment had 81 homes listed, right? This month, not the same, 40. So everything is down noticeably, and it's just kind of across the board. You can't really single out one market that's experienced this more than others in the listing category. They're all kind of down a comparable amount.
Hey, Zach, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, please.
When you said down, do you mean versus last year or versus last week, the week before?
So versus last month. So when you look at this, So when you look at this slide, so basically it's broken up into kind of three ways to look at it. These at a glance numbers, like I said, it's last month, right? And then last year. So you get to compare really quickly on some big things. When you look at this, bunk them in whatever March it might be. So April, that is only this month in a vacuum. It's not compared to anything. It's just this month. And then when you get to the graphs, you get to see, so at the bottom, you'll see April is highlighted in green and then also in red. So that's year over year with some trailing months to show you how we should have been coming into it. And then what we can expect to see based on last year for the months coming forward or ahead rather.
Gotcha. And I'm wondering, the reason I asked that is not to rabbit hole this whole thing, but I wonder if the listings being much higher the previous week or previous month was when they opened up and made us essential. I wonder if there was some pent up demand there.
Oh yeah. Funny you should mention that. So I'm going to open up another sheet just to really confuse you guys. So the week of April 13th, right? That's right after real estate was made an essential service, right? New listings increased 29% from the week before, right? That if you've been coming to the data, like the deep dives and everything, that was the story. You know, there's pent up demand. People are trying to do stuff. The market wants to move, but there are outside influences that are obviously affecting it, right? Under contracts increased 88%, newly under contracts, 88% the week of April 13th. So that's a great insight. And so as the real estate professional, as you're coming in, again, this report is good enough. This report is kind of like the alley-oop. It puts it up there, but you're supposed to dunk it. You have to come with all this extra information. So if you are specializing in homes from 300 to 350, basically, or if that's someone you're speaking to, buy or sell, then you need to know that number and then know it in context. So as you give them this tool, it's not just, hey, I can read off this just as well as you can. I'm actually adding a lot of value here. I'm bringing.
So is it? So how would you? What's the verbiage around that? Like, what would you recommend?
So it all depends. So basically, you would go into your price range, and so if you're trying to buy, right? I think it's two versions of the same story, and we spoke about this not too long ago, right? It's even though there's uncertainty and even though things are happening, just like any other investment, you have to think of your investment horizon. How long are you looking to hold this house, or how long have you had this house, right? So there's going to be fluctuations in the coming month, 100%, and in the coming year, something. But if you're planning on holding this home for 5 to 8 years, then you're trying to make a decision: is it going to be better then? Right? Am I still buying in something that is reasonable enough that with a long enough time horizon, my profit is there to enjoy the investment?
That's awesome. And I'll just throw in there that Gary mentioned on one of the last sessions I was on that the average home time to hold a home has moved from 5 to between 7 and 8 years, which is interesting. Because I've always used the metric like every 3 to 5 years, people are changing their house, and they've seen nationally that move up into the 7+.
Oh, wow. Well, so on that, again, you adding value, like you can't just totally rely on this document. What you come to, and we're skipping ahead really quick, is home prices, right? So year over year, you can see the trend that homes are improving, and that's just with 1 year. So then if I were you and I'm going to a home, I would look at the trends for that price range and tell them the sort of appreciation they can experience. And so the flip side of that is if they're selling and they're like, oh, well, what if the market's going down a little bit? It's like, sure, it might be down X% from this last month or whatever it might be, but you've had it since this, you've appreciated that much since then. And since things are coming down a little bit in the market, then if you were to have sold last month, you might not have been able to jump into a bigger home or a more expensive home. That other home is now comparatively lower as well. So you're just framing the two sides of the same conversation.
That's interesting. Thanks.
Yeah. So we see that the market's moving. We see that the market, basically call it 400, right? Under 400 is certainly seller's country. And then above 400, I'm trying to get to this slide. Actually, let's look. Yeah, basically 450 is an interesting market, but yeah, we're moving towards neutral for the short term. Remember, these are only within 1 month. This is just what happened in April. That's it.
I've got a quick question.
Okay. Yep. What's up, Ken?
Not much. I'm just curious, like these numbers include townhomes and condominiums. I'm assuming, correct?
Yep.
If you broke those out on their own, would there be much difference between looking at them on their own as opposed to combining them with single family dwellings?
Well, so I haven't done that.
So
go for it, Jeff.
Well, I was just going to mention that a lot of the, I mean, outside of your luxury properties, a lot of these condos are FHA backed. And I think with the changes we've had in lending across the board, because that's a smaller segment, I would wonder if there was greater implications in that sample size, because there's a bigger pool on the residential home side. I'd be interested to look into that. That's a good point.
Yeah, that is interesting. So it might affect, so I was basically going to say a version of the same thing, right? Would it affect the overall trend? I don't know. The volume is not that much compared to how many just single home families.
Okay.
But does that not mean some serious things are happening in that specific market? No, right? So it might be worth looking into that if that's what you're interested in. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
All right. So graphs, much easier, right? Just pretty pictures. Volume and activity, right? So you don't have to know very much to know that those bars are lower than the ones before them, right? So we are down compared to this time last year. If you were to look, so all the way on the left, you've got February. So already our February was lower, but March was higher than February, April was higher than March, right? And then May, et cetera, right? We're not seeing that. We're seeing something else. Now, the good thing about that, air quotes good here, right, is that it's pretty easily explained. We've got a global pandemic, uncertainty, unemployment, things are happening, right? So it's not like, geez, the market's really shifting. It's like the world is shifting, right? So that is happening, but back over here to our next slide where I make this point, listings and closings, right? So fun thing to say when you have this graph, if you're to look at December, one of the things to call out is that when the green line, which is homes sold, is above the red bar, which is new listings, then you took more inventory off than you added, right? So just little things to start like talking about. And when you add more homes than you take off, then you're increasing inventory. So just kind of one of the ways to interpret. So again, new listings are down and so are home sales, even though that's a lagging metric. But like I said, some important ratios are holding very, very strong, right? The absorption rate is only a couple percentage points off from April of last year. So even though volume has decreased, the market landscape is pretty similar, right? So that is assuring. That is saying that all things relative, there's less around, but it is kind of it's a similar market in feeling, in essence. Any questions on that or where that leads? Also, just in case you're wondering what all these random numbers are, so basically, and I'm going to add a slide about this because I've had some questions. The numbers that are called out on the graph are this month, the last month, the 12-month low, the 12-month high, and then this time last year. So sometimes the high and low and last month, and so sometimes only be 2 or 3 numbers, sometimes there's as many as 5, but that's the reasoning behind these numbers. It's just to kind of give you a gauge. This is as high as it's been, this is as low as it's been, this is where I moved from this time last year. Home prices. So we talked about this. The big thing of this slide, if you look at the bottom, under the slide, it says the median price is the middle price. It basically gives you that explanation that I gave at the beginning. And then the last bullet point, which for as long as it stays this way, it will remain the same again, just to have you add value when you're talking to your clients, is that the higher average versus median home price tells us that Bunkin's high-end market is strong. Back to our example of the $1 trillion house, bringing up all the $1 homes. And so why you want but as you'll see, the median and average kind of track each other. So again, the trends are similar, but because there are more expensive homes being sold in general at a higher price point, it drags the average up with it. So something to note, again, if we look at this graph, so April on the left with the red box, the one that's called out at 365, that was a slight decrease from March. So we had a comparable slight decrease, right? This was, and we called this out on the last report, we could expect to see if it holds the trend. And so the trend kind of held, we reduced prices ever so slightly, but the rest of the year, last year, it kind of went up until summer, basically. So we'll see if we have a comparable rebound this time of year, but to be seen. Days on market coming down drastically, right? After spiking in February, coming down 2 months in a row significantly, even though everything is going on. So it seems that the players may be different. It's not the same people looking for homes or selling necessarily, but the ones that are very serious about it. They understand that if you're going for a home in this area under 300,000, you have to put in an offer, that these things are moving. And back to how do we talk to our clients about that? If you come to the sheet in April and you go to the price range, then you get the specifics. So if you're under 200,000, it's 27 days on market. Don't wait. Same for under 250. And then if you're trying to get into the 1 million to 1.5, well, the homes that sold in April were on the market at average 155 days. So you use it to set expectations.
Zach, you said how many days on market for under 250?
So for under 250, basically from 0 to 250, it's about 28 days, under a month.
That's crazy. And is that from that's from when the listing hit the market, or where's that trigger event?
Yep. So that is from the day that the listing hits the market to the day that they accept an offer and go under contract.
Wow, that's incredible.
Oh yeah. So then not all numbers are equal, right? So if you go to the 700 to 799 price range, it's 28 days as well. But you'll see there's only so many homes under contract, less, right? Where 200 to 250 has 84, 700 to 799 has 18. So similar, but not the same. Again, interpreting the numbers, being that consultant and providing that value to your clients. So days on the market's going down. And again, how do you dissect this number? Well, to the next thing, the contract to close, right? The contract to close time is staying pretty steady. We'll see how that happens, or rather increases or decreases in the coming months with all the uncertainty that's going on. But these, again, you just kind of inform someone, buy or sell side. Well, once the offer goes through, we're looking at around this long. And then back to the sheet, in your price range, the average again is about this number. So contract to cash, right? How long from the moment I'm listed to the moment the contract closes? Well, how long the money is in my pocket or I walk into the door, right? Decreasing again, and again, kind of dissecting this second bullet point, you'll see it's helped mostly because the days on the market, right? So contract to cash is a combination of days on market and then contract to close. So if the contract to close is staying the same, the mortgage people are doing their job, the inspectors are doing their job, basically about the same, then you can say it's because the market is moving faster. And that's how you start coloring this conversation and kind of incentivizing people to act. And then, calls out a couple price points that are of note. But basically, this is it. These are your 10 slides, right? That's everything you kind of need to know. And you should package it together, because if you were a realtor in this market for 20 years and you know it like the back of your hand, well, that same knowledge isn't as directly applicable because of what's going on due to the uncertainty, right? So whether you just joined the market or you've been here 20 years, if you have this data-driven knowledge behind you, you're on equal footing. You can start telling your clients with a very, very good level of certainty what's happening. Never tell them what's going to happen, right? But you can tell them where they are and set their expectations and explain what's happening, kind of demystify everything in the fog of war that we're experiencing right now.
That makes sense. That's awesome. Zach, man, this is crazy. It's so helpful.
Thank you.
You guys appreciating this?
Not horrible. Silence is consent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. These are super wonderful.
Cool. That's great. It's really empowering. I think that's the biggest thing, is like we're all looking for a way to empower ourselves or gives ourselves a more value proposition. And if you haven't been in the market, I hear all the time, like, I'm new, I don't have the experience. Like, this gives you the experience. This is the lens that you can look at the market in. So it's incredibly valuable. And thanks, Zach, for all the work you're putting into it. He's busting his butt on this, y'all. So please, let him know if we can adjust it to make it more valuable. But thanks.
Yeah, so already I'll just really quick, and then I want to open it up if anyone has any questions at all. So this sheet changed from last month. Everyone's like, I just wish I could access really, really quickly. What did it look like last year, right? And so there it is. It's changed. The market spoke. So if you guys have any other questions and you want to see it different in any way, shape, or form, or if you want to customize it for yourselves or your needs, just reach out. It's super, super easy.
Right. Easy just means I have to do more. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Meaning, right.
So, but yeah, like, let's say you were really interested in a certain price point. I'm not going to make a report for you, but I can crunch those numbers. Like, we can look into it together. We can figure out what's going on. So,
and this is, so a lot of you, or maybe more numbers based than some others, or some of you, and you know how to go to extract some information. The intent with this is, if you need to deep dive on something, of course, reach out to Zach or get into your MLS and run some reports. But this is your overview. This is your listing powerhouse sheet, buyer powerhouse sheet, to get those conversations in the right direction.
Oh yeah, and I would just caution, if you're going to use SAM or any of the pre-made things from the MLS, then go to town, go all day. But if you're going to pull things yourself, there are a lot of nuances to getting this number. So you don't want to put out inaccurate information. Just make sure you're checking everything and double checking everything before you do it. I've learned a lot.
I'm a student of inaccuracy, and that can work also. No, I'm just kidding. You should be accurate.
Awesome. Well, if anyone has any questions about anything, now's the time. There's a good question about the condos and single family. We'll see, if that's worthy of its own report, but if that's something you're interested in personally, then that's totally a discussion to have. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, Trent, I know you got some questions. You're analytically minded. Is there anything that's jumping out to you?
I feel pretty good about most of it, and feel pretty confident that I can dig into, the things that I need specifically in each situation.
That's cool.
Very nice. Awesome. Well, if that's it, I'll give you all the rest of your day back. I'll be posting this and at some point, Hendersonville, today on Facebook. It's just, there's a lot of tweaking that has to happen between then and now. So I pulled the data. So turns out as a realtor, right, you should start putting your data into the MLS as soon as possible. I know you're supposed to do it within 48 hours, not the case, right? So I've been waiting till about the 5th. So last night I pulled the data just to make sure I get as much accurate info as possible. But yeah, so that's why there's a little bit of lag between the beginning of the month and when this will actually come out. Very cool. Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
I appreciate all the interaction and the feedback. You guys have really been a dynamic group. That's been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Zach.
Thanks so much, Zach.
See y'all.
Bye.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Boom, boom. And we are. Alrighty. See you guys later.